Hey everybody, Jeff here with the Curse of Oak Island and Beyond live stream, and we have a great show for you here tonight. Two very special guests. One returning, Robert Westrick, is here with us tonight, and he's brought along a friend of his and fellow underwater archaeologist, Doug Gossage. So we're going to bring these guys on, and we're going to have some fun. They're going to be telling us all about searching for Spanish gold and shipwrecks and some of the things that's happening with the right now with the government and you know the salvage rights and things of that nature. We'll dig into that a little bit more as we go along here tonight. But I tell you what, it's going to be a fun evening. Grab your scuba gear and let's dive into it right now.
This is Robert Clotworthy, the narrator of The Curse of Oak Island, and I have a question for you. Could it be that you are listening to The Curse of Oak Island and Beyond live stream?
This is a top pocket find, mate, for sure.
All right. Hey, welcome everyone. And here we go. And thank you so much for coming, Rob Westrick and Doug Gossage. Thank you guys so much. Really appreciate you coming by tonight. As I was saying, I am somebody who is so very interested in what you two get to do. I'm assuming as a hobby. I don't know if you do this full time or not, but just the idea of being able to do underwater archaeology and to search for shipwrecks and then recover what may be on those shipwrecks. It's just fascinating. And people like me, I would love to do that. Of course, that wasn't my calling in life, but now we get to experience this through your talking about it here tonight. And again, I can't thank you enough for coming on and joining us. Um, Rob, we've had you on the show before. We had you guys Rob, you were on Beyond Oak Island, actually a couple of times, I believe. And you were featured on, I think it was season 2, episodes 1 and 4, talking about the 1715 fleet. And if you don't mind, just give us a few. There's a lot of people who may not be familiar with you and your background. If you would just share with us just a moment, a little bit about your background and how you got into all this.
I'm a professional marine archaeologist. I've been interested in the 1715 fleet pretty much my entire adult life, going back to when I was a little kid. And my grandparents had a bookshelf full of old National Geographic magazines, and the January 1965 issue had a story in it by Kip Wagner, and it was about Florida's golden galleons. And read that, and I basically have been hooked for life and been doing this, as a career for my entire life.
Wow. As a career. See, that's the fascinating part. You get to do what you love to do for a career. That's fascinating. That's really cool. So thank you so much for that. Doug, we haven't got a chance to really talk to you or anything before. So tell us a little bit about Doug and how you got involved in all of this.
Well, I have owned a dive store in Chicago suburb area. It's now in Northwest Indiana. So my father and I, who's now deceased about 15 years, but we've been active divers, and as part of the dive store, we got interested in doing surveys, and in Lake Michigan was a World War II training area for pilots, and there were 2 passenger carriers that were turned over into landing craft, and all the pilots out of Great Lakes Naval Station had to do, I think, 5 touch and goes on these makeshift landing craft. So there were over 200 historic planes that either missed the ship, fell into the water, broke their landing gear, whatever, and they just shoved these off the deck as the next plane's coming in, and there's, wasn't a real aircraft, carrier that had room for these on the deck. So
Right.
200 planes in Lake Michigan, and that's my backyard. So
Wow.
my dad and I started with side scan sonar, looking and hunting for those things, and then it just kind of took off. And years later, Rob and I met, and we're kind of focused on what we're doing now.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. That's really cool. So, and again, that's an interesting story about in Lake Michigan. And that's kind of, you both talked about, and we'll get into this a little bit about you were actually filmed for a Beyond Oak Island episode. We'll talk about that a little bit here as we go along here tonight. That hasn't yet been aired. So that'll be interesting. I know that Rob, he's a world renowned diver now and treasure hunter. I hate to use the term do you like that term, treasure hunter, or would you rather the underwater archaeologist?
More archaeology, but
yeah. And then, and that's something I mentioned this when we had you on the first time, was talking about the archaeology part of it. And I know that you guys now, that because of that, you look at this a little bit differently. We've talked to the archaeologist we've had on the show here from Oak Island, and you talk to them, and they'll adamantly tell you, I am not a treasure hunter. I'm an archaeologist. I look for things in the ground and things that artifacts that will tell me the who, what, why, when, and where. They will tell a story, and I build the story based upon what I'm finding. And they're very meticulous about how they found it, where they found it, documenting everything. You have that same philosophy, I assume.
Yeah, absolutely. It's about the history and what you can learn. These shipwrecks, they're time capsules. Mm-hmm. And, it might be 2022 here, today, but when you're on that shipwreck, you're all the way back to 1715, or you're back to 1695, or you're back to whatever that particular event happens.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Yeah, I see, exactly right. And then you build that story, and then you document it, and then we get to find out about it. And so you share that with us. And now we are going to learn as well. That's the beauty of it. And I mean, as a kid, I remember growing up watching Jacques Cousteau. Now, I don't know much about him as far as the diver side, but I watched the show, and it was so fascinating to see the things that they would find. So, Doug, I know that you have something very passionate that we talked about a little bit early before the show started. Where did you want to start? Go ahead.
Well, Rob and I both have separate sanctuary, Florida Keys National Marine Sanctuary. So the Florida Keys from Key Largo down beyond Key West is one huge National Marine Sanctuary, just huge. I'm sorry, I don't know the number of thousands of square miles, but it's Rob, maybe you do, I don't know. It's very big. And what they did in that, it goes well beyond the state, the state limitations of what they claim is their waters,
right?
Like maybe 21 miles beyond. So they've kind of taken claim to all submerged cultural resources in those areas, and that's happened in the 80s. But back then, there was, treasure hunting, if you want to call it that, then was very active. And there were a lot of people working a lot of the 1733 wrecks back then, and discovering, finding, displaying, sharing it with friends. There were a few dive shops that had quasi museums, if you will, where anybody that walked into there would, be able to get a little lesson. State had nothing. Really now still in the Keys has nothing as far as 1733 museum. I have to tell you an interesting story. This kind of shows their disposition about treasure hunting, if you will. So the 1733 fleet is a fleet that, like the 1715 that Rob has talked about on your show before, in several ships that were lost there. It was a treasure fleet. It was loaded with treasure. There was an academic. Sorry, Rob, you're an academic, but Rob's a good guy academic. He's not, he doesn't stick his nose up at the public sector. He invites it. He nourishes it. And there should be more of them like that. But unfortunately, that's not the case. And there's a woman archaeologist, I think from West Florida University, that tried to wrote a paper, and in this paper, she was saying that it's not a treasure fleet; it was a merchant fleet that happened to be carrying some treasure. What was the value of the 1733 fleet, Rob, altogether?
About 12.5 million pesos in treasure.
But it wasn't a treasure fleet, right? So,
right.
It's her words. She actually said, we need to educate the public that it's not a treasure fleet. And then she actually corrects herself in writing and says, well, maybe that's not the right wording. We need to re-educate the public about what this fleet actually was. Re-educate us?
Yeah.
You mean tell us, what they want us to start calling it? Unbelievable. And that's the type of attitude that there is out there. But right now, as we speak, in July, this month, the new proposed draft environmental impacts, what is it called for DEIS, Rob? Draft environmental not income. The sanctuary, the people from NOAA are trying to eliminate all private sector search and discovery, and they've done a good job of kind of keeping the numbers down over the last 20 years anyways, 30 years, but now they're just boldly trying to just pull the rug out from underneath any private sector. And I got to tell you, my permit is 21 square miles. So it's 7 miles of shoreline, 3 miles out, 21 square miles. Some of your viewers might understand what that means. When we do our survey, I do primarily magnetometer surveys nowadays because all of the historical wrecks are completely buried under the sand. Very little is above. If there's anything above, those wrecks have already been found. And that's why 2 of the 33 wrecks still have not been, I found them. We're going to say they're not found because. Okay.
All right. Sounds good.
Because Rob and I are the only ones that know where they are. So 21 square miles, you're running a boat at 5 or 6 knots, which is very slow. It's, a fast walking speed, constantly on the wheel, trying to keep the line straight so that the waves doesn't push you or the wind doesn't push you or whatever. And so you've got a piece of equipment out behind you. A lot of time. I've done 21 square miles, thousands of miles, thousands of hours. I can tell you there is not a single university academic that has done anything close to the amount of time I invested, my own money, my own time to survey. And the results are there. I found several wreck sites. And I found a lot of Henry Flagler railroad stuff, which is historic artifacts all in it. I don't know if you want to go into that, but
Oh,
those
sure.
are things that the public should know about. I say Henry Flagler. Most people don't know what that is, who that is. Henry Flagler was part of Standard Oil, and he was the brains of Standard Oil. Um, and he was a entrepreneur back in the early 1800s, and he built the train that runs from Miami all the way to Key West. So
Oh,
if
wow.
anybody visits Key West now, drives down that beautiful drive, they are on the old railroad right of way that
Oh,
was
wow.
sold in 1936 to the state of Florida. So, but
I didn't
he's the
know
one that linked them all together, with the bridges, the original bridges, and the fill and all of that. So it was a huge endeavor. And the sanctuary doesn't even really like that because it's an industrialist, I guess. I don't know, today's environment,
that. Right.
that those rich industrialist guys are bad. But if you enjoy the Keys and the sanctuary of the peacefulness of it, it's because of that person. So he's
Right.
got we found as part of my survey we found crane arms, big cranes, steam engines, barges, rail cars, all kinds of things that are working their way below the sand. These are big pieces of equipment. Some of it is still on top of the seabed. And this is what 100 years old that it's been lost, not 300 years like the 33 wreck. 1733 wrecks. So all these items eventually just kind of they succumb to the elements,
Right.
whether it's the water, above, or it all just goes away if it's
Yep.
not found, and it gets harder and harder to find the longer
Right.
the longer it sits there.
Yep. And I know that you had mentioned too, and I've got it. I pulled it up here. Is the in this process of them trying to shut down, what you guys are doing out there. I guess it, and again, I kind of take this as the academics not wanting or not feeling that underwater archaeologists, you guys are just out there trying to, you're not worthy of dealing with what you might find. But then again, the things that they have are all the things that have been found are because of people like yourselves discovering it and finding it and bringing it out. So if that stops, they're not going to find anything. I mean, how many hours do they have out there looking for these types of things like you do?
Well, nothing's
You
going to
have
be
a,
found.
I'm sorry, what was that?
Nothing's going to be found, and the stuff is just going to deteriorate over time. Like Doug says, I've got a permit in the Upper Keys on one of the
Mhm.
1733 shipwreck sites. Every year I produce a report, and in doing my survey work, uh, I had Doug come do a remote sensing survey, and he found two historic shipwrecks that the sanctuary knew absolutely nothing about. And
See?
he's out there, we're out there. We're not costing the taxpayers any money. We're doing this on our own.
Right.
You know, as our passion and as what we can find and discover, and willing to conserve stuff. One of their big bugaboos was, back in the 50s and 60s, they would pull cannons up, put them alongside the road. They weren't properly conserved, and over time they would just deteriorate. Well,
Mhm.
we've learned a great deal, in the last 20, 30 years, and that's not the way things are anymore. And Doug had found some, historic, significant things. And well, we don't want them pulled up, unless he's going to conserve them. And we were willing to, build our own conservation laboratory, conserve them. Well, we don't want things pulled up unless you have a museum that's willing to exhibit them. And he had an agreement with the museum
Mhm.
to be able to display this stuff, and that still wasn't enough. It's always, another hurdle. And this stuff's at the bottom of the ocean. Not everybody's a scuba diver. Not everybody's going to be able to see this firsthand. If there's a museum that's willing to display it, and you know, all kinds of people could see it,
Mhm.
and they just want to shut that down altogether. And Doug has, in my mind, I've seen a lot of the data. He has found the two missing 1733 fleet shipwreck sites. And that was actually, going to lead us into Beyond Oak Island. They contacted me. They wanted to know if I had a show idea. We were going to do a show in the Florida Keys on what Doug has been working on and what he's found.
Oh, wow. Mm-hmm.
And, that just didn't happen because of all of the rules and regulations in place. And so here we are today. So we ended up on a different show together, but,
Yeah, that's really sad too, because it means it like you said, you guys are doing your due diligence. And tell me just briefly what the current, if it doesn't get changed, you said you're fighting this right now. It's happening right now. What is the current? I mean, I know you've told me before, but for our viewers out there, what is the current policy on what you might find that's in the water, let's say 3 miles out? What's the current policy about finding stuff right now?
Well, currently there's a 3-step process to the permitting, and the first one is a exploration permit, a search permit, a non-intrusive, remote sensing type survey. The thing that's what I've specialized in. And I got to say, when I first sent my first application in, the people at this, there's a lot of agencies involved in it, right? Department of Defense, NOAA, Department of Commerce, all these, logos at the top of the letterhead. Fisheries, I think, Florida Keys Fisheries. So it got to the state, and the state archaeologist at the time didn't want to authorize my permit, even though I was picking up the permit that I had worked on with the renowned, well-known historic shipwreck discoverer and recoverer, Bob Frogfoot Weller. I don't know if you've ever talked about Bob Weller on this show or not, but Bob was a wonderful guy, and Rob and I both have, links back to Bob Weller. Well, Bob had the original permit, and he passed away, and I picked up the permit and followed it through and improved the equipment and did the entire thing. And I was his marine or his remote sensing specialist when he had the permit anyways. It's just we had older equipment. So, where was I going with that? The permitting. So, this was a permit that was already in existence. I was very experienced in what I do, and the state archaeologist said that even though they're not supposed to deny anybody that wants to do it, he said it wasn't compelling enough, and I wasn't experienced enough. And I had hundreds of hours of experience. So I did a little tricky thing. I said, okay, well, what do they see as experienced enough? So what do the college kids that want to become archaeologists do to get experience? And West Florida University offered a weekend course. A weekend course in remote sensing, and they would get proficient in using 5 major pieces of very technological advanced equipment, sub-bottoms, profile in a weekend. So I and at the time they actually would allow people that weren't enrolled in the university to attend that. So I said, hey, I'm going, sign me up. And they got wind of it, and all of a sudden, nobody from outside the university was allowed to go there. So I figured that's all I had to do was to go through a West Preferred University weekend course to be, an expert. Sign me up.
Yeah.
So he got his hand got forced, and he signed the permit. So that's the first step. And then the problem is the second step is a what's it called, Rob? You start with the exploration, and it's a limited.
Take to identify.
Yeah, limited identification. So they're supposed to allow you to maybe use a dredge or a jet to move a little bit of sand. Oh my goodness, that's all you can do is hand fan like this. And to tell you what hand fanning is, if you can see this motion right on the bottom
Yeah.
with the sand, that's like digging an in-ground swimming pool with a garden shovel. That it is. So that's just, you can't accomplish anything. You can dig maybe a foot below the, in sand, but
Right.
sand is a moving, dynamic thing. You move it
Right.
and it fills back in. So
Right.
you need something that has constant pressure to kind of keep that hole open and really see what you've got there.
Right.
Well, they put me through and said no, you can't do that, because going back to the artifact, the Henry Flagler artifact that Rob was talking about. It was a little rail cart upside down. I don't know what was in it. It was wheels up. Some of it was submerged. Looked like it had a brake on one of the wheels. I don't know if it had a little, unique steam engine. I don't know why it had a brake on it. It wasn't big enough to be like an ore car. Maybe it was a personnel. We don't know what it was. That's, and I can't find any pictures of it in any documents. So this is history. What is it? What was its purpose? Nope. You'll have to go through the Army Corps of Engineers and get a dredge and fill permit. So I contact the Army Corps, and they're like, "Why are you contacting us?"
Doug, I've got a picture of that. If you want me to put it on.
Yeah,
the screen.
I'll bring that up. There we go.
Yeah, there you go.
Wow.
So you can see laying in the sand there. What is that? Is that a drive shaft of some sort, and the wheel on the left there? That to me looks like a brake. And so you can see, there's something underneath it that's heavier than the wheels. And train wheels are pretty heavy, right? So why did it fall off the barge or whatever it is and land like that? There's something underneath there. I can't even, dredge that out. I couldn't lift it. It would be a very simple thing for me to do. So they keep throwing, as Rob said, they keep throwing obstacles to you, to the point where nobody gets to that third step to apply for a salvage permit. And that's one of the things that they're using in their new Florida Keys National Marine Sanctuary. What's the word I'm looking for? I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. It's incredible.
Doug was willing to recover this, conserve it at his cost, and the Florida Keys Discovery Center was willing to put it on public display.
Yeah, so everybody could then share it.
Everybody
see
it, enjoy it, appreciate it, learn something about their own history in their own backyard. Exactly. And instead, this is still on the seafloor, and it's 100 years from now, it's not going to be there.
And you may not be interested in that particular object, but it'll tell you, you'll learn more about Henry Flagler and the railroad, and why you're able to drive down that way, and hopefully appreciate that.
Right.
But they're using that, the fact that nobody has applied for a salvage permit in the last 30 years as ammunition to why they should wipe this clear. Well, nobody's applied for it because they've made it impossible for you to get to that step.
It's got to be frustrating, so frustrating. And aren't you guys, when you're out there and you do find something, I know Rob and I talked about this on the previous show, that you have a certain percentage that you have to give to the state, I guess, and you get to keep part of it. I mean, what is that? Is that still in effect right now, as of right today, or?
Rob, that's for you.
That's the agreement in state waters. The sanctuary is kind of unique because it is both state and federal, because it's a national marine sanctuary, and there is no such thing as a national division. So in the Keys, there would be no state division.
Okay, all right.
But here we are. We're doing work, and we've got different museums willing to put stuff on display. And if professionals like Doug and I aren't able to do it, the ordinary guy doesn't have a chance.
Oh, no way. Absolutely no way at all. Wow, that's incredible. Now, I know, Doug, you and I, we talked about this particular petition that you have out, and I brought that up. I'd like to talk about, or let you talk about that a little bit as I display this. Is that all right to go ahead and do that now?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so let me add this in. Now this, and I'll let you. This is a website, folks. It is in the linked below in the description of the show, and it's where you can maybe help. So I'm going to go ahead and bring that up, and I'm going to let Doug talk about it.
Yeah. So they started, I think, 2 years ago with a draft proposal, and that was vetted in the public, with a opportunity for the public to comment. Of course, I made comments on their website and in person. And this site was brought up by yet a third permit holder in the Middle Keys, and Taffy Fisher, of course, of the Mel Fisher fame. They have a huge stake in what's going on there in the sanctuary, because their Atocha and Margarita sites are in the sanctuary. So, they're a long time, many of the family residents down there, and they're concerned with not only the effect that the new rules are going to have on submerged cultural resources, but also on fishermen and businesses. So we created this website to get our own, list of people that want to say no, don't expand the sanctuary. And you'll notice on the top right there, it says affected industry. So it's a basic site, it's one page site, and then you have these 4 drop downs. And if you go down and you click on historic salvage, you'll see
All right.
The look doesn't change a whole lot, but if you scroll down, keep scrolling, there you see historic salvage and a couple of bullet points, and that's what affects what their proposed change affects the historic salvage mostly. And then if you go back up and you go to maybe fishermen, to the affected industries, that drop down again, scroll down again. So it's duplicate information until you get to that section there.
Right. Okay.
So and this was largely on Taffy Fisher, because she's friends and neighbors with all the people that make livings down there other than historic Shipwreck. So she wanted to include everybody, and why it's bad not only to our cause, but to other people that work and try to make a living in the sanctuary. Right. So we appreciate anybody that hits that up. Only hit it once. It doesn't do any good to hit it, okay, more than once. It'll get flagged, and just makes work for us if you do it more than one time.
Okay. Yeah. So you see this, folks, here. This is how you can help, and to keep things the way they are now, and not let this take over to where the fact that they won't be able to even go out and look for these things anymore. This is how you can help. It's sign our petition. It is in the link, and it's called Say No to NOAA, and that's NOAA. NOAA is NOAA. Say No to NOAA.org, O-R-G. And like I said, I do have it linked below in the description of the show. But you can go on, you put your name in and your email and sign the petition and help. So if you want to do that, it would be good, to jump out there and try to help out, so that these gentlemen and folks like them can continue to do what they do, and to bring these artifacts up, like that train car that was upside down in the water, so we can get to see what it is. I mean, that's a historical piece of equipment that I would like to know what it is, and I would like to know what it was used for and when and all of that. But it's sitting upside down in the bottom of the ocean. Nobody gets to see it except for a picture like we just saw. So yeah, if you get an opportunity, please go out and go out to this website. It's saynotonoaa.org, O-R-G, and check it out. Read over all the stuff they have here, and if you feel inclined to, go ahead and sign the petition and then submit it.
Yeah, and we're not saying necessarily that a sanctuary is a bad thing. There's a lot of good things that are a result of the sanctuary. A lot of preservation, birds and turtles and that sort of thing. But it's getting a little heavy-handed, and like we say, they have the academic archaeologists have a term that they like to use of in situ preservation. Okay, so in other words, that means, you have an old lawn tractor sitting out in your yard, in the weather and, under the trees. I don't personally, but, that's in a state of preservation. Now throw it in a caustic environment of salt water
Mhm.
and metal, and there is no such thing it really as in situ preservation. That's like re-educating the people that the treasure fleet wasn't a treasure fleet. And
Exactly.
boy, they're 2 feet in, and they've jumped in on that and doubled down on that as a valid um, you know reason to stop recovering things. No,
Yeah.
it doesn't work. You
Yeah.
have to recover it. You have to try to preserve it. Some things won't preserve. Some things are gonna, you know, disintegrate when you do that. But they are certainly going to disintegrate if they stay where they're at
Oh yeah,
underwater.
absolutely. Yep, that's for sure. And that's the thing, we've seen how some of the things like, and I'm going to jump to Oak Island for just a moment. And when they talk about things that they find, or when they find a piece of even wood in this swamp, somehow because of the makeup of the material and the swamp muck, it preserves stuff very, very well in there. I mean, there's pieces of barrels and things that they found in there that are very, very old, and it works really well. Out in the ocean, in the salt water, that's a different story. Things are not going to hold up that long. Gold will last forever, we know that, but I mean, iron items like that train car and things like that they're gonna deteriorate pretty soon. They're gonna be gone altogether. You mentioned earlier in the show about just going around, and when you're doing your magnetometer readings and you're going across, you're looking for those metal hits. I'm assuming, right?
Yes.
So, and if you did not have that, and you were just going by and looking down there, you're going to pass right over stuff because of the fact it's been down there so long. Most of the wood is gone from the shipwreck, and now you're just looking for metal or things left behind that don't deteriorate quite as fast. They're going to get missed if we don't have folks like you out there looking and finding these things and bringing it to the surface for everybody. It sounds like a lose-lose situation if they go forward with this. It just does. It doesn't make much sense, really. Um, but I'm glad if we can help out in any way, we certainly will, of course. Um, so talking about that type of stuff. Now we know that, and Rob, he was involved in the 1715 fleet, and Rob, I know you've probably done a lot more than just that. Tell us a little bit about some of the other projects you may have working on. What do you got going on right now, currently?
Not a whole bunch I can talk about.
Okay,
Uh,
all right,
you want to talk a little bit about Poverty Island and what we did there?
sure, yeah, okay. Now,
Uh,
folks, Poverty Island. Yeah, if you've watched Beyond Oak Island, you saw out at Poverty Island when they had Mr. Abbott go out on the boat with Marty, and they went out on the boat. This is up in Lake Michigan, in between the Lower Peninsula and the Upper Peninsula. Poverty Island, I think, is actually supposed to be connected to the Upper Peninsula in the UP, up near where I am right now, actually. And it's an island that they had gone by. I think they talked about it being a French ship that may have thrown some. They didn't want. They were being pursued. They didn't want the money that they had on board in the treasure in the chests or whatever to be captured. So supposedly they tied it with chains and threw it overboard. And correct me if I'm going wrong anywhere, Rob. And then they wanted to go by later and maybe hook it and bring it back up later when they weren't being pursued. So they had Abbott out there. He was doing some scanning down there and all that. And I heard something about somebody. You guys went back, right?
we did. We went back. I had been on a previous couple of episodes with the 1715 fleet. I suppose the History Channel and Prometheus, were happy with the job that I did because they called me a few weeks later and said, "Hey, you got any other show ideas?" And
Hmm.
I've been working with Doug on his 1733 fleet project. And I said, "Yeah, there's a guy you should call and get And we they had written up the show. The producer had written up the show, and we wanted to go out and look at some of the stuff Doug had found. And but you're not allowed to do anything, and you can't. You can only hand fan, and so it's like that doesn't make for a whole lot of interesting television to go and look at a you know sand on the ocean floor when you can't do
Right.
anything. So that kind of just died on the vine, and that episode never happened. But a few weeks later, they called me back and asked me what I knew about Poverty Island. And I was familiar with the story, and got Doug involved, and they set us up there to be a part of that episode.
That's awesome. Now I know you can't, there's a possibility, hopefully, that this episode will air at some time. So I know you can't get into the specifics of it. But was I correct that the little description I gave, is that pretty much the way?
That's pretty accurate. I can give you a little bit more of the historical background, kind of rehash it. I've got
Okay.
a little bit of a PowerPoint presentation,
Oh, perfect.
but
That'd be awesome.
before I go into that though, yeah, we had gone up there to do this, and it was supposed to be the season finale. It was scheduled to air March 27th or 29th, whatever that
Mhm.
Tuesday was, and the week before they had found Shackleton's ship in the Arctic, and we got bumped they ran a special that week, and the week after they immediately went into a Lost Treasure of the Aztecs. So our show is kind of in limbo. It never has aired. We're hoping that they will, History Channel will put it on at some point in time.
Mhm.
And there was a
Season 3.
little bit of talk that it's going to be the opening for season 3.
Oh, that would be fantastic. Yeah, that would be great. We'd love to see that.
They had said
So
the producers had said they thought it was one of the best episodes of the season, and they like kicking off the season with a really good episode, and they like finishing the season strong with a really good episode to measure the ratings of what the series was doing from episode 1 to the last episode, and get renewed and have there be more shows. So that's what we hope happens.
yeah, absolutely. Wow, that's really interesting. And I know the whole Poverty Island story that we did see, the episode we did see, I thought was fascinating. It really was, and it's more close to home for those of us, at least in the United States. And me in particular, being in Michigan right now, it's very close to home. Um, so I'd love to see that. I really hope that gets aired, and you guys get a chance to talk about it in depth. Now, Doug, you're involved in that episode, this second one as well, correct?
Yeah, I think I was a pretty major involvement in it. I was asked to. Oh boy, this is difficult
I
to
know.
talk
I'm
about.
sorry. I don't want to put you in a bad spot with
Skip
that.
around. Yeah, I just don't want to say anything wrong.
Yeah.
But yeah, we um, I did what I do.
Okay.
Um, um,
Fantastic.
and kind of expanded on what they did already. They did very limited
Yeah.
sector scanning sonar, which
Yes.
is not much. But I gotta say, doing something for the TV cameras versus getting the work done, there's a difference. It's like, I thought I'd go and I'd get a day and I'd really do my thing and do a lot of survey and a lot of lanes. And, by the time everything gets, tons of people, I don't know what, 20 people, Rob, all involved in it
Wow.
between, all different titles, getting all those people out of bed, early in the morning and then traveling an
Yeah.
hour, to where the boat's at and getting the boat going. And I think the boat was a fishing boat, a whitefish boat. So, they they get all the day's fish off of the boat, spray it down so it doesn't smell like dead fish, and put a picnic table on it, and then here we come. So um, yeah, it was definitely interesting. I'll tell you that boat, the back end of the boat, the deck, it's not a dive boat. Um,
Mhm.
so the sidewalls come in on an angle like this, so that
Wow.
fish that are laying, I mean, the fish are just laying on the deck.
Yeah.
And
Right.
you can imagine, a couple, I don't know, 1,000 pounds of whitefish flopping around. They don't want them just flopping off the boat, right? So that they're on an angle like this.
Mhm.
So trying to get out of that boat
Oh my goodness.
as a diver with your fins on, you can't. There's nothing to step on.
Right.
The rail was very thin, and it. My first entry was hopefully not going to be on film. I know they got it on film, but hopefully it's not aired because it wasn't pretty.
Oh, I know. And I know that's something that's important too about how you enter the water with all your gear on. When you got your scuba gear on and the wetsuit and everything, and you got your fins and everything. Yeah, and you have to be very careful. We've seen signs or times when people have actually been injured by slipping as they're trying to. And so if that's not set up as a dive boat, it's set up, like you said, as a fishing boat. Oh my gosh. I mean, people can get hurt if they're not careful. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
The other challenge was when we were talking about doing it in the first place, we were on a Skype call, I guess, producers. I don't know if Rob was on it at that point or not, but because we were basically talking about diving and getting Maddie and Marty in the water with me.
Mhm.
And so we were talking about a exit ladder back onto that boat.
Right.
And the captain, who is just a wonderful guy, I really liked him. Had to manufacture a ladder. Well, it was not a dive boat ladder. It was, how about it, Rob? It was challenging to
Yes.
get up with a tank on your back and, try to wiggle your way around. So that was fun.
Kind of takes the whole thing to a new level. Jan asked a question here. She said, how many people do you need to man the boat while you're doing searches? And I guess we could take this two ways. When you're doing a scanning search, or when you're doing an actual dive operation, there might be two different calls there for that sort of thing.
Definitely for the survey, you've got equipment that you want to try to monitor the results of, and then you have your navigation, and what viewers probably don't realize is for good data to be useful, especially with the magnetometer, you have to run a very straight line. And it's kind of like a video game / real life, moving environment. It's not driving a car where if you got a good balance in your wheels, you can take your hands off of the wheel, because there's constantly waves pushing you, currents, wakes of other boats, wind. So it's a constant, very strenuous thing. And you're standing the whole time you're doing it. So that's what I do. I navigate the lanes. I have to have somebody on the computer kind of, when one lane is done, I want it, taken off of the map so that it's not complicating things. And I just want to see the lanes that we have left to do. And he'll start and stop the recording of the data. So we need a second person for that. And then, if you can imagine, that person is looking at the computer screen. I'm kind of looking at the computer screen, which is showing me my cross-track errors, where I'm at compared to where that lane is at. Looking up at the clouds. Hopefully there are clouds. If it's a clear sky, that makes it more challenging because there's nothing to focus your eyes on out that way.
Right.
And then it's all video game. It's just looking at that. And that's a kind of a delayed reaction when you're looking at just the computer screen. So now in the Keys, and like this time of the year, it's lobster season. Well, I guess maybe soon it's going to be commercial lobster season. So there are hundreds of lobster pot buoys on the surface of the water. And that's an obstacle course. I mean, you're trying to go straight, and it's like, darn it, there's one of them, buoys there. So you can't just come up to it and, zip around it. You have to, well in advance, move over, because you've got equipment towed behind you. And then once your equipment is clear, then you can move back in again. So, and with the glare and everything that's going on, it's good to have a third person who's basically just a spotter. And he's looking out and going, buoy, buoy straight ahead, that's challenging at certain times of the year. So 3 people. We don't like to, have more than what's necessary. It just complicates things.
Yep. And I know when they're filming, you got a whole boatload of people, because you got camera guys and sound guys and dive, your dive. You have to have somebody on board, and also do you have like medical people on board as well when you're diving and doing that, having that kind of a scenario? Or
well, that was kind of my role. I played several roles. I was the dive instructor, the dive guide, the survey guy, at one point the underwater camera. They wanted to have Marty and Maddie in the water, and Marty didn't. I guess I could say that Marty didn't wind up diving on the episode, but Maddie Blake did. And that was fun, because
I'll bet.
Maddie's a new diver and he didn't have his own equipment. So I've got, of course, a room full of dive equipment in the dive
Right.
shop for student training and that. And wetsuits are kind of funny. We're going in northern Michigan water. So even though it was July, yeah, it was, it can be cold. I was actually surprised it was not as cold as I thought. That being said, I was diving in a dry suit, not a wetsuit. So,
Yep.
but still, yeah, Maddie did not say he was cold. But we made him try on 3 or 4 different wetsuits. Of course, all we got was his height and weight. But I didn't really know him very well, and so I didn't know he was a stick. Very, very, very fit, tall, slender, does martial arts. Wonderful guy, great attitude and everything. But,
He might have said he wasn't cold, but his chattering teeth said otherwise.
Right, yeah. In hindsight, yeah. So, so I wanted to make sure that those guys were prepared for that. So we did a little pool session in the hotel pool before that and worked with the full face masks, because they want to have communication. So,
Right. Yep.
And that's not, you don't just throw a full face mask on a diver, even in, somebody with moderate experience, and expect them to be comfortable with it. There's emergency procedures to go through with it. And so we did that in the pool. We had a nice time. We had a nice time.
So I guess we got that PowerPoint ready. Is that right? You have that ready to go?
Yeah, I'm ready to go whenever you are.
All right. Well, let's go ahead and I tell you what. Before I do that, let me get rid of what I've got over here first. All right, and then we will add that into the stream. There we go. All right, you are ready. Go ahead and take it away, Rob.
All right. Well, the episode was about the episode was actually called "The Riches of Poverty Island." So, going to give just a little background of the history and the legend of Poverty Island. And there's the Poverty Island Lighthouse back in the 1920s.
Oh wow.
1930s. Right there, you can see how rocky the terrain is. It's just a rock island. Here to give you a little bit better idea of where we're talking. So, here's the Upper Peninsula. And we're right up there, the northern part of Lake Michigan. And the legend, basically, the treasure of Poverty Island goes back to the American Civil War. And, April 1861, the U.S. Civil War starts. Pretty much the Confederates, attacked Fort Sumter. And one of the first things Abraham Lincoln did was he proclaimed a blockade of the Confederate ports from South Carolina to Texas. And the following week, the blockade was going to include Virginia to North Carolina. So this is thousands of miles of coastline that have got to be blockaded, and all the Confederate ports are blockaded. And basically, at the start of the Civil War, the blockade was in name only. The Union Navy at the start of the Civil War only had 90 vessels on the rolls, and of those, only 46 were in commission, and only 24 of those were steamships. So basically, it was non-existent, and the supplies would go in and out of the Confederate ports, into Wilmington, Charleston, New Orleans. It didn't exist, the blockade. But by the end of 1861, the number of Union vessels had increased to 508, and within a year after that, it was up to 671. So it became increasingly difficult to get anything into these Confederate ports by the middle of the war. So by 1863, the blockade is working. The Confederates aren't getting their supplies. They're not getting their arms and ammunition from overseas like they were. And the war starts really turning in the side of the Union. 1863 is when the Battle of Gettysburg happens. Same time Gettysburg is going on, the fall of Vicksburg in Mississippi happens. And slowly this plan is actually working, and the Confederates are basically getting starved and supplied out of their existence. So they actually turn to somebody for help. This is Napoleon III. He's the Emperor of France. And according to the legend, he agrees to send $4.5 million in gold to the Confederacy to aid them. And with the blockade being in full effect and not very many ships making it in and out of the blockade, they come up with a plan. They're going to actually kind of bring this gold in through the back door. You can see there, they're going to come into the St. Lawrence Seaway. They're going to travel up, down through the Great Lakes, go up into Lake Huron, and basically go to Escanaba. From there, they're going to go down to Chicago, and then all this gold is going to be put on a railroad car and shipped by railroad. So they're trying to bring this gold in, through the back door.
Mm-hmm.
Only problem is when it's right here, the ship actually gets boarded by Canadian pirates. And before they're boarded, supposedly all the gold is it's in 5 iron chests. The chests are bound together, and they're dumped overboard in relatively shallow water. And the whole idea is they're going to come back later and they're going to be able to snag these chests and recover them. Well, that doesn't happen. 1929, happens, and these chests are accidentally snagged in another ship's anchor. They pull it to the surface. It breaks the surface of the water, but once you lose that tension, the chain broke, and these 5 chests went back into the ocean.
So somebody actually saw them,
according to the legend.
Right. Yeah.
That's the legend that's out there. I haven't been able to find any supporting documentation that is this just an urban legend or did it really happen? There's really very little out there that would support this or disprove it. But apparently, here's what we do know for historical fact. 1931, 1932, and 1933, there's a guy named, forgot his name, Wilfred Brennan's. And he purchased an old schooner, and he had it outfitted as a salvage vessel. They renamed it. Was called the Alice originally when it was built, and it was renamed the Captain Lawrence. They had it outfitted with a dive bell, some pumps, and a donkey engine, and some other salvage equipment. And for 3 summers, they were off of Poverty Island, doing their thing.
All right.
Trying to snag these, the 5 chests of gold.
Right.
And the last summer they were there, the lighthouse keeper's son used to go down onto these rocks and watch the activities. Mm-hmm. And something happened where they pulled something up, and he described it as, some pandemonium, that everybody was, shouting and joyous and just having a wild time. But in excitement, they're going to
found something, obviously, yeah.
And unfortunately, that evening, a storm blew up, and Captain Lawrence sank. And this is another one of those discrepancies that a couple of records indicate it sank with all hands. There would have been about 5 guys on board a vessel this size, and they were lost. Others, some of the historical records kind of, say there was survivors, but so that's kind of a little bit of, bone of contention there. But so that's where the story comes from. Whether or not there's 5 chests of gold off Poverty Island, what did they snag? What did they bring up? What were they excited about? Who knows? But this is a picture of the Poverty Island Lighthouse today, and it's just around the end of a point. That's a photograph that I took. So that was on our trip, which was July of last year. There's Doug in the pool training Maddie Blake with some full face mask, full comm gear, scuba equipment prior to us diving. There's just probably half the people that were on board the vessel.
Yeah, look at that. Oh, my goodness.
We must have had 20 different guys on board, between camera guys and boom guys and sound men. So that just kind of gives you, there's the picnic table Doug was referring to. He's got his magnetometer equipment set up on there. You see some cables running around. There's Doug having a chat with Marty. You see Maddie there on the background. Mm-hmm. So the first day we went out and we did a little bit of magnetometer work. Again, you can see the vessel we were on, and the camera crew. That that's an angle you don't normally see. These guys are usually behind the scenes, and the show just shows the 3 or 4 principals involved, but there's
Right.
20 guys on board. Um, yeah, just a few pictures, of our day. Beautiful, beautiful weather. It was flat, calm out there. Second day, there's the dive ladder that Doug was talking about. You can see the side of the vessel,
Strapped
and
on the side there.
yeah, you would have to be a very athletic individual to even try to get on board this vessel
Oh my goodness.
from the water, because it's probably about a 6 foot drop down to the water.
Yeah.
But you see how close to the island we were actually working. I mean, we were right off the shore of Poverty Island. Very rocky. Doug can tell you about the bottom terrain, what the bottom looked like. There's Maddie and Doug getting ready to go in the water, and see. And then there's Marty telling us, where to go, where we should dive, and what he thinks we're going to find. And
Nice.
And there they are diving, and that's probably, I don't think we can kind of tell what we found or didn't find. You'll have to tune in to the episode to find out what exactly, what transpired next, so to speak.
Yeah, exactly. Black screen. Time to talk about something else.
No spoiler alerts here, so you'll have to, when they air it, you'll have to watch and learn what we did find.
That's amazing. That's really cool. And and thank you for sharing that. I know and we don't want to obviously get you into any trouble with any of that kind of stuff, but it's interesting to see how close you were to the shore. Now I know that when they were out there with Mr. Abbott was doing Abbott. I was trying to think of the name of his company, underwater surveying, something like that. But anyway, when he had his equipment out there and they were scanning the bottom, you had just mentioned yourself how rocky the shoreline is of Poverty Island. And you know that those rocks probably extend out into the Lake Michigan a ways. So anything you scan down there, it may be a chunk of rock or other rocks that are down there rather than some chests. So your scanning that they were doing was picking up a lot of those great big rocks. And you can see how squared off some of them are. They might actually look like some sort of a chest or a box or something down there. That has to make it extremely difficult. Now, if you're going to do with the magnetometer survey, now you've got a better opportunity maybe of finding a hit that's actually metal in some way. But if it's now that won't pick up gold, right? It's only going to pick up ferrous metals. Is that how that works?
Yeah, that's correct.
So the chest is going to have, or the chain, maybe the chain that's wrapped around it, something like that. Would that, how deep would that work? Is that going to pick up a chain that's 30 feet down?
Well, with the magnetics, it's not really a dynamic metal detector. Puts out a signal and then reads a return. It's reading kind of the Earth's magnetic field and any disturbances in it. So, and it's also a matter of distance. So, what weight of chain, if you want to talk about chain, how was there 15 feet of chain in between each chest? Was there 3 feet of chain? That's a smaller target, and then is the chain buried under 2 feet of sand, or is it laying on top of the surface? And so, and then where is the sensor, in the depth column? So are you scanning, 10 feet off the bottom or 2 feet off the bottom? So that's all what comes with experience. Having an idea of what you're looking for, what kind of mass that is going to be, and then, working your instruments and your tools to best detect it. And that only comes from experience. You don't get that. Exactly. You don't get that in a weekend university class.
I'm just gonna say that you don't get that in a weekend, cram or a speed course of, that's just so many. It's so ridiculous in so many ways that they would think that a person that has the experience that you have of years of doing this is not qualified. But if you go to this course, for a weekend, that just doesn't make it. It's just ludicrous to even think that.
It makes you upset. Yeah.
Absolutely. Now, Poverty Island is the one nobody's allowed on that island. Is that correct? I saw one of the folks that asked that question. I believe Poverty Island's off limits.
I don't know about that.
Yeah, there was people on the island when we were there. They pulled up in a little cove and were, sitting on the rocks watching us. So I don't know.
Wow, interesting. Yeah,
I didn't see them. I didn't see them, Rob.
But that was when you were diving.
Oh,
It
okay.
was.
They were checking out, see what you guys were doing. And
Yeah.
somebody else mentioned something about it being snakes or Snake Island or something like that. There's all these snakes on it or something. I think that was the guy that was out with Mr. Abbott was talking about a lot of snakes on the island. When they were talking about that during that episode, I think, or something. So, wow.
All it has to be is a rumor about that, and it'll keep me off of it. Could be no truth at all, but I'm not going on it.
Yeah. Wow. I know. I'm okay with snakes as long as I know where they are, as opposed to where I am.
For me, it's snakes and bears.
Oh, really?
You know, probably not valid, but I don't like them.
Well, the black bears are okay. The ones in Michigan are okay as long as you're not messing with a cub. If you just see a black bear, they're going to try to stay away from you. But now grizzlies, on the other hand, they're not in Michigan, but grizzlies are another. They're mean.
Well, you haven't had recurring nightmares as a teenager about bears chasing you when you're riding your Schwinn bicycle down the street.
Oh, yeah.
So, like I said, valid or not, everybody's got their thing they're scared of.
Oh, absolutely. Okay, Jan asked a question saying, does that mean that there's a shipwreck down there with the chest? No, I think that was, I'll let you explain this. It was just the chests were thrown overboard. Is that right?
Initially, the chests were thrown overboard, but the Captain Lawrence did wreck.
Yes.
And that's, if you can find the Captain Lawrence, those chests might be close by. But you're talking a target, 2 by 2 by 3 foot in 60 to 80 feet of water in a mile square. That's such a small target. And with the Great Lakes being geologic in nature, you see those big rock outcroppings on the island. You've got the same type of terrain, underwater. So
right.
I mean, yeah, if you could find pieces of the Captain Lawrence and find the Captain Lawrence,
you may have found.
That'd be your first clue. That'd be a lot easier to find than the chest.
So, how deep was that water where you were looking? How deep was that? It didn't look like you're out very far, obviously, as you mentioned. But how deep was that?
It was too deep to stand up in.
Okay, thanks. I know I did. I treaded there, didn't I? I'm sorry.
Nice try.
Yeah, I told you earlier that I would try my best not to do that. There I went right down that road. Sorry about that. So yeah. So anyway, well, I tell you what, I certainly hope that episode airs. I would really love to get to see that and find out what you guys may or may not have found out there. Very interesting for sure. And that was it's an intriguing story to me, not only because I'm from Michigan, from the UP, but also because of the fact that there are so many shipwrecks around the Great Lakes. I mean, I mentioned this, I think, to Rob once before, is that I was actually, some of the restaurants you go to a restaurant, you get your placemat. And one of the restaurants I had gone to down in the lower peninsula once, they had the placemats there, and these placemats paper, it had the layout of the Great Lakes, and it showed close to every shipwreck that had happened, and it was covered in shipwreck documentation on this map, and it was incredible to know the number of. I had no idea that it could be that many down there. So when you're out there looking for something like this, you might be coming across other shipwrecks that you didn't even know were around, and now you've just discovered another one for whatever reason, and man, you would almost have to go check that out. Is Michigan, is the rules to apply the same as like when you're doing what you were doing for that show? And again, I don't want to get into an area where you can't answer, but is it, are you allowed to touch or just observe and that's it?
Rob might be able to answer better, but I think it's very similar to Florida,
Very
and that's the attitude that I took. We just use our keen experience eyes for unusual shapes, that sort of thing.
Right.
Yeah, we weren't prepared to do any sort of excavation or sediment disturbing. It was strictly remote sensing, and then divers and seeing what you could see on without doing any sort of disturbing.
Right, with cameras and such. And I know they run into that same thing up in Oak Island, when they're out there when Tony Sampson is diving or whatever. Yeah, like you said before, you can kind of do this above the whatever it is, a rock or something you found, but you're not allowed to remove that kelp or really get a good look at it. You can't do that. And you have to say, okay, we think this is something, and now try to go get a permit so you can go back and actually uncover it, whether it be a Canon or whatever else. You just have to use, as Gary would say, your twin optical sensors to see if you, and again, this is where your experience falls into play, that you guys have done this for so long. You're more apt to notice something that looks like something than someone like me. I'm going to look right and not even notice a thing. Oh, that's just regular sea bottom. With your experience, you guys are going to notice things that the average diver would not, which just plays into the experience. Again, going back to what they're trying to do at NOAA and everything else, is stopping that from happening, which is crazy.
Yeah, as frustrating as you can imagine it is for the viewers of the Curse of Oak Island. It's not the Lagina's fault. It's they're following the rules. So, and when somebody's frustrated, why don't they just pull it out and see what it is?
Yeah, exactly.
You hear the comments that it keeps getting dragged on. Well, that if we could just do what we do, the story would be probably told already.
Exactly.
Complete story.
Exactly right. Well, we certainly hope that show gets aired. I tell you, I would really love to see it. And to see Matty Blake in a wetsuit. He was. I think he went out. He was out with Rob before, and we got to see. And I've forgotten what the term is. But when you take the props, you put those tubes down over the props of the boat, and you use the downwash
prop duster,
prop wash deflector, or a blower.
Yes, and be able to blow all that sand out of there so you can find stuff. That's amazing. And then Matty didn't get in the water at that particular time, but he probably took the lessons after. But that's something that's amazing. Now, are you in that area where do you have to get a special permit to do that sort of thing? To do the prop wash?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And that's pretty hard to come by nowadays. And it should only be done in certain areas. Granted, you don't want to overburden covering.
Well, the Great Lakes are an exception too. That there are intact shipwrecks in the Great Lakes. There's 100-year-old schooners that still have the mast. It's cold, it's fresh water. It's a totally different scenario than what Doug and I were talking about earlier with the coast of Florida. There's nothing left of a wooden ship. It's warm, semi-tropical waters. There's shipworms. The wood gets devoured. You're in a saltwater, very harsh environment. So, the Great Lakes and the ocean are two different, apples to oranges, and there's certain things that, when you're looking for a 1733 fleet or 1715 fleet shipwreck, you're just finding the cargo. The ships are long gone. There is no, quote unquote shipwreck. It's not, it's not the aquarium shipwreck that, still got the mast standing and the skeleton at the helm, But the Great Lakes, there are wonderfully beautiful intact shipwrecks in the Great Lakes. And of course, we don't want to go out and, put a blower on those ships and rip the timbers apart.
Or dismantle them.
Exactly. Right. So, it's two different you talk about the in-situ preservation. Great Lakes is very, very different than, the coast of Florida.
Right. Have you dove the Great Lakes before? Besides the Poverty Island episode, have you done other, or maybe you're not allowed to talk about those either, but have you done other looking in the Great Lakes?
Yeah, I'm born and raised in Toledo, Ohio. So, my parents live a half mile from Lake Erie. So
there you go.
And I grew up 20 miles from the southern tip of Lake Michigan. So, in the 70s, before the Teredo worm, or not the Teredo worms, the zebra mussels kind of covered everything. I was diving in the 70s and the 80s, and of course up to the current date on the shipwrecks. And you could see the wrecks. Now the zebra mussels have covered them. I've got a picture, I don't know, maybe from 1980 or so, that I took with an old Nikonis camera. and a 15 millimeter lens of a pile of anchor chain, just a big pile, and you could see each and every link. And now it just looks like a pile of rocks because the zebra mussels have totally occluded, anything that you're looking at there. So
Yeah, that's what Kat said there. How is the zebra mussel situation? Are there many when you dive? And apparently there are.
in the shallower water, they don't go too deep. I don't know. Maybe you start losing them at about 50 or 60 feet, I think.
Mm-hmm.
What they have done is make it where you can see what you're doing in the Great Lakes, though.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, back in the
visibility.
Back in the 70s, if you went out and you had 15 foot of visibility, horizontal visibility from you to the next guy, well, you were on the phone calling all your friends, telling them, hey, you got to get out there. It's visibility is great. Now that's a bad day, and you have 40 or 50 foot of visibility.
Yep. Wow. There is, there's been a couple people, and I don't know exactly. Oh, this was Tom Burns asked this question about a debris field. So, do you find where debris fields are stretched out over a long area, or are they pretty tight knit around where the ship would be, or what have you found in that?
It all depends on the sinking scenario. If a ship, capsized and relatively sank, some of the ships in the Florida Keys, the 1733 fleet shipwrecks, basically ran aground, and that's where they got stuck, and that's where they remained. And so the ballast piles are largely intact. Whereas you've got other shipwrecks, the Maravilla or the Atocha, where there's debris fields that go for 10, 14 miles.
Oh, wow.
It depends on what caused that vessel to sink.
Right. Yeah.
And how quick an event it was.
Wow. Yep. Interesting. I was just going through and looking at some of the questions and comments that the people watching have brought up here. Let's see. Oh, and the cat mentioned something about the Asian carp, but have not reached the Great Lakes yet. I don't know anything about. I'm not sure if either of you are familiar with the Asian carp.
No, I think that's the ones that jump in your boat, isn't it?
I think so. Yeah. Yeah, that's the ones.
Fun to watch, but no, I have no experience in it.
Let's see. Oh, this must be some. I don't know if you know this person, Dennis Hedrick. Magnetometer is a passive instrument that measures changes in the Earth's magnetic field. In the ocean exploration, it can be used to survey cultural heritage sites such as a ship and aircraft wrecks. Okay.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. It's different from a metal detector, which is a dynamic instrument that puts out its own field and measures another one. Okay. This is passive, and it just reads the Earth's magnetic field and disturbances. And of course, an airplane or the components of a shipwreck, the iron components of a shipwreck would be detectable.
Yep. Here's a good question here, too. This is from Catherine. Says, have you ever found ancient styles of anchors? And I suppose over the years, you've found all types of different types of anchors, I would imagine.
Yeah. I did some work in Malta. And we were looking for, a biblical ship, Apostle Paul's wreck. And
oh, wow.
And of course we were finding lots of other things there too. And we were working with the University of Malta at that time, and it was a good relationship. It was one of those rare that I found symbiotic, private sector working with a academic. Nothing, no offense, Rob, like I said, is different. He's
a good academic.
He's a good academic. Sorry to the rest of them that are kind of brainwashed. But anyways, so we found the anchors out there. Those ancient anchors are pretty interesting. The stock, instead of being wood, that's the part that goes across the top.
Okay.
So normally most people think of a wooden stock. Those stocks were lead. And that's what survives from those anchors. The shank and the flukes were wood. So
Hmm.
it's kind of opposite, and all that is deteriorated in ancient anchors. The tips of the flukes had like metal to help it, dig and not
Again,
just
right.
get beat up. But there's, Apostle Paul was on a grain ship, which was like the tankers of today,
Right.
and so there in the museum out in Malta, there's a couple of these stocks that are, gosh, I think 14 feet long. So
Oh, wow.
you can imagine that ancient anchor.
Wow. Yeah, absolutely. I gotta ask, what did you find out there? Besides, did you? I mean, that's a story that I know very well because I've read the Bible a few times. But I mean, did you think you found it out there? Or?
So if you're familiar with the story, it kind of, the bow kind of hung up on a sandbar, is what they called it, and
Yep.
then the waves beat it to death, and it deteriorated. So one of your other viewers asked about a debris field. So now this is wood that would have, floated and gone for a long distance, and
Yeah.
some of those
Yep.
wood pieces would have had. Problem is there, it had. Copper or bronze or wood, nails or fasteners, if you will. So
Right.
not much iron.
No.
So that's why I was brought in, because I've kind of made a name for myself for finding the things that are very difficult to find. There's people that can go out and buy a magnetometer and go out and tow it around, and you'll probably find stuff, but you'll find things, individual items, not
Right.
necessarily the what's really beneath. That takes time and experience.
Yep.
But we did find a what was it, a Roman ship. I think it was third century A.D.
Oh, wow.
And lots of pottery still laying in the sandy pockets. But in those bays, Malaya Bay, Salina Bay, there is Posidonia grass, which is seaweed, if you will, and
Hmm.
these mats just grow. It's so hard to find anything. But we determined, we found that wreck. Um, I found. So I don't know if it was ballast, but there was some, looked like lava rock, piles of lava rock, like maybe it was cargo, and it had molten or melted glass kind of through the
Really?
lava fissures. So
Wow.
the academic at the time, a great guy, um, Timmy, what's his last name? Um, can't think of it, but he wrote up the paper. My work is in that paper if anybody's interested in looking at it. University of Malta, Timmy Gambine, I think, Gambine, maybe.
Okay.
Also a very nice guy, wonderful guy. He's done some great work on some deep wrecks near one of the islands there. So yeah, my results were they found, I had to leave, of course. They live on the island, and they continue to investigate the things that I wrote in my report, and I understand that there are other wrecks, old ancient wrecks that I led them to.
Okay. Yeah. Now, here's a question from Will. I has a question here. As how much do you think is still left to be found from the 1715 or the 1733 fleets?
That's for Rob.
Yep.
So,
Just an
oh,
estimation.
there's more to be found in the 1715 fleet just because of the fierceness of that hurricane. Those
Yep.
ships, like I was mentioning earlier, had their bottoms ripped out and they scattered northward and just, were totally disintegrated by the hurricane. And they had said on the Oak Island, Beyond Oak Island 1715 fleet episode that there's probably still a billion left to be
Oh, wow.
found on those wrecks. And there's still, two of those shipwrecks that have never even been found. 1733, the Spanish were much more successful in salvaging those shipwrecks. Most of those were left fairly intact and were pretty thoroughly salvaged by the Spaniards. So that's why you're not seeing a tremendous, you know, like you find on the 17, 15 fleet. But there's still stuff out there on both fleets, and there's still ships from the both fleets that are still missing and
Wow.
unaccounted for.
Wow. Are you going back out to do some more with that soon?
Oh yeah.
Good. That's great. Well, we'd love to hear about it when you do. Jan asked also, this might be another one for, well, actually for either of you. Have you ever found any downed planes in the water?
Yes, I
I see.
have. Uh, yeah, some of those World War II planes in Lake
Yep.
Michigan,
Yep.
and then there were a couple of accidents, plane accidents that we went out with when we were still doing a lot of side scan sonar, and found some more modern planes. I noticed somebody had a comment that about questioning ancient anchor in the Great Lakes, and they didn't catch that we switched to other sites. But I wanted to comment about that I have found anchors in the Great Lakes that had Old English weighting numbering system stamped into it.
Really?
So this is a wreck that looked, or not a wreck, it was an anchor just sitting all by itself. No wreck within 2 miles, maybe beyond that, but wasn't attached to anything, just something sitting there. And
Wow.
I noticed the numbers on the bottom, and I didn't. They were curious to me because they weren't like evenly spaced. And I did a little research. It was Old English weighting system on a shipwreck in Lake Michigan,
Hmm.
lost off of a ship. They had to carry lots of anchors. Ships lost anchors all the time. But the
Right.
question now becomes, where did this anchor come from?
Right.
I don't think it was from a foundry in the United States. If it was, maybe very early to use
Right.
old English weighting system. So it could have been a ship that was in the Caribbean or who knows where, right? And needed an anchor. They
Right.
lost one, and the guy said, "Oh, we got 20 of them back there. Go dig one out that you like, and we'll make a
Yeah.
deal." So anchors wind up on ships that weren't,
It was
commissioned
paid
when the
for.
ship
Right.
was. So yeah.
Right.
So this is maybe an older anchor, than ships were really plying the Great Lakes.
Interesting.
Interesting.
Yeah. Very interesting. I think Rob's got another little something he wants to share on the side here. Let's bring that up.
Yeah,
Okay.
I've got a couple diagrams that I just wanted to show. This kind of diagram shows the wrecking process of what these ships look like from the time that it wrecked, and within 20 years it's falling apart, it's collapsing on itself. By the time you get to today, there's what you're looking for. There's what's left, and it's not a whole bunch to be found.
No. Absolutely
Somebody
not.
asked about the debris trail. I got multiple windows here, so let me see what I've got here. Can you see that? Okay.
Well, for a moment we did, and then it went
For a
away.
moment.
Oh, there we
Yeah,
go.
yeah.
Okay.
There you got a ship, and it's coming, and it's about ready to strike a reef. So I mean, it strikes a reef, and immediately stuff is happening to that ship. The forces of nature, the wooden stuff, the light stuff is floating away. So as soon as you have a shipwreck, there's parts that were on that ship that are no longer there. Stuff's floating away. The heavy stuff's floating to the bottom. You sinking to the bottom, not floating. But
Right.
it's leaving a debris trail.
Yep.
And and I talked about when I gave my 17, 15 fleet, presentation when I was on this show last. But
Hmm.
here's a picture of the Titanic,
Right.
and that's an iron hulled ship that sank in 1912. That's been on the bottom for just a little over 100 years.
Yep.
And that was a picture of the bow when it was found, and it's not going to look like that. It is rusting, it's falling apart, it's collapsing, under its own weight. 50 years from now, it's going to be flattened out.
Yep.
And Doug and I are looking for these wooden ships. There's nothing left of them. So the in situ, these ships should be left alone. Crowd, no, they're disintegrating. most people would swim right over that and not even know it. That is a 300-year-old wooden shipwreck.
Right. Is
You know,
that the was that the ballast right there? Is that the ballast
that's
pile?
that's some of the ballast pile.
Mhm.
There's the ship that I have a permit for down in the Keys, the El Infante. You know, that's some of the timbers are left, but you know, not very much.
No.
So
No.
I mean, you are looking for ballast stones, you're looking for cannons, you're looking for anchors. You know, most people would swim right over that, just think, hey, that's a pile of rocks. They wouldn't
Yeah,
realize,
exactly.
you know, once upon a time there was, you know, there's a ship wrapped there, and if you find that, you can find the stuff that that vessel was carrying.
Right.
So I mean, uh, you know, and I was saying that, you know, night and day difference between, you know, finding a wooden ship in a saltwater environment like the Florida Keys, as opposed to, you know, the Great Lakes. This is a picture I'm going to put up next. It'll be my last one. But War of 1812, the Hamilton and the Scourge. These are two shipwrecks that are in Lake Ontario,
Oh
and
wow.
you can see the difference. I mean, these ships are intact. So of course, you know,
Okay.
Doug and I don't want to, you know, put a blower and destroy that. That's, you know, intact shipwrecks in the Great Lakes. It's a different ballgame.
Wow.
And the state of preservation, because again, it's cold water. You know, the Great Lakes are very deep water. You know, this is in a couple 100 feet of water, and everything is very well preserved. You don't find that. You know,
Oh, look at
typically
that.
when we're in the Keys and on Florida in the 1715 fleet, you know, you're in a surf zone. I mean, a deep dive, you know, on a 1715 fleet is, you know, you're in 12 feet of water. You know,
Yeah.
20,
Yeah.
20
Yeah.
feet of water is a deep dive.
Right.
Uh, you know, the stuff that they find. So, yeah, just
Wow.
wanted to draw that distinction between, you know, a Great Lake shipwreck and an ocean shipwreck.
Right. Wow. That's fascinating. Sure is. And a question popped up for Doug. Doug, what is your dream dive location?
Oh boy, is it directed towards searching for shipwrecks or just diving?
I
Because
didn't specify in the question. It
well,
was
it
what
sounds
was
like
your dream?
maybe diving. I've been fortunate. I've been all over the world. I've been to all the places that I want to be. You know, the Red Sea, the Galapagos, the all the spots in the Caribbean. You know, hundreds of dive trips that I've led through 30 years of owning, 40 years of owning a dive store. Ooh, that gave away a little bit of my age, didn't it? uh, so, you know, one of my best spots was a trip that I just did, and it was to Fiji. And I have to say, the
Oh,
very last dive that I did on that live aboard vessel was probably the most beautiful reef that I've ever been on.
wow.
And I sucked every ounce of air out of my scuba tank in, you know, at the safety stop and probably at 5 feet. And then I switched to my snorkel. I did not want to leave. And
Oh
that
man.
was close to 2 hours. You know, it's just, they had to
Wow.
drag me off that reef. Fiji was beautiful. A lot
Wow.
of other places are beautiful too. Red Sea
Right.
is nice.
Well, I had one question that was asking about the picture that's hanging up behind Rob. What ship is that?
That's Nuestra Senora de Concepcion that sank on Silver Shoals in the present day Dominican Republic.
Right.
But a friend of mine actually found that shipwreck, and you know, that's one of the shipwrecks that kind of came about on you know, Oak Island, suggesting that some of the Concepcion treasure made its way up to Oak Island. If you remember that.
Yeah, I do.
So,
I do. That was Phipps and
yep,
Melcher. Yeah. Yeah.
exactly. So, yep,
Yep.
that's the Concepcion back there on my wall.
Ah, okay. And another person mentioned the gun behind you, the blunderbuss there. That's or that the signal cannon. What is it? Was that the small one that would be mounted on the rail of the ship?
That's a small swivel cannon, and that
Okay.
actually is a reproduction piece
Oh, okay.
that,
All right.
that a friend of mine made.
Have you found things like that?
Yeah, well, yeah, I found lots of stuff like that, and
Oh,
you know,
see,
I've
that
been
would
doing
be
this
so
for, you know, as long as Doug has. So,
cool. Oh man, that's so fascinating. I would just love to be doing what you guys are doing, but I enjoy doing what I do. So, and bringing you guys on and having a good evening with you, talking about this kind of thing. I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up. I was just going back and looking for some of the questions. Um, What about skeletal remains? Oh, somebody asked about that. What about skeletal remains? Do you find them? And if so, what do you guys do with that information? Have you ever found skeletal remains?
I found skeletal remains in the Rex and Truck Lagoon back in the 1980s, but that that's was expected. That was our revenge on Pearl Harbor. We
Right.
fought the Japanese fleet there and sunk many of their ships. So you leave them alone.
Yep.
It doesn't stop the dive operators from bringing people there.
Right. Yeah. Just respect the as a water grave, right?
Yeah, just pass
See
by
that
it.
for sure. Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, just keep on going. It would be a little freaky though to be going, especially a plane or something, and come by a plane and the pilot is still, at the seat there and the cockpit. Might be a little
That's a
unnerving,
whole
I think,
different
a little bit.
story. Yeah, it's a whole
Yeah,
different story. Mhm.
because it kind of takes you to that for sure. So, all right, well, I'm going to wrap things up, guys. Man, this has been fascinating, and I tell you, I'm really hoping that we get to see this episode of Poverty Island because many of us, when we saw the first episode, when Mr. Abbott was out there and doing the scanning, it kind of left me wanting more. I wanted more information about that, and um, I'm glad that you went out. I hope we get to see that. I really
What can
do.
your viewers do to, you know, nudge the History Channel and nudge, to, hey, we want to see
I
this.
Yeah, Linda, we got to come up with a campaign or some sort of a petition or something that we can do with. Now we got to. There's two entities on this to work with, I guess. There would be Prometheus, that would be the production company that did all that, and then there would be the History Channel. So I don't know which one we have to go after, but Linda, let's start something. We have to do some sort of a campaign to tell them that we want to see. Um, I don't know what was it. Do you have any idea what the episode might have been called or anything? Probably not. They come up with those
It's
on
got
their
the
own.
name Poverty Island in
It
it.
was called
Okay.
The Riches of Poverty Island, and it was supposed to
Yeah.
be
Okay.
season 2, episode 9. And
Yep. So we got to do it. We have to get that. So whatever we got to do to whatever we have to do to be able to bring that to the air. So we got to help. So we're gonna come up with something if we have to do a petition. We have a few contacts here and there throughout of the industry, not so much with the History Channel, but with Prometheus anyway. So hopefully we can. Uh, oh, they've checked with the History Channel, no response. Okay, so anyway, we've got to. Oh, they thought they. Oh, Linda says she's talked to Prometheus, and they thought they would air. Now we got to do what we can to make sure it does, for sure, because I want to see it. I want to know what's going on. Well, guys, this has been an absolute fascinating evening. Thank you so much, Doug and Rob, for coming on and sharing this stuff with us. I love it. I love the diving and the underwater archaeology that you guys do. I think it's fascinating. I would. I've had some friends of mine that are divers, and they've dove on different wrecks in the Great Lakes, which is something I would love to do. So I might. I mean, are you too old to get to be certified?
No.
I don't think so, right?
Mhm.
I'm getting up there, but I tell you what, if I can do it, I'd like to. I have dove before, but it was in a foreign country where they didn't really care too much about certifications. They strapped us up and said, "All right, let's go," and we jumped in the water and off we went. So
Yeah. No, you want to do it right.
yeah, I definitely want to do it right. When your life is at stake in that type of a situation, you want to know what to do in the event of any kind of an emergency situation for sure. And just getting used to putting that mask on and going underwater and breathing through, um, the apparatus and everything that you have. You're underwater. Your brain is thinking, I can't breathe when I'm down here. You're not supposed to be breathing when you're down here, and trying to get your mind wrapped around that and be able to breathe kind of puts you over. I don't know if you guys heard that. I know my internet kind of
Yeah.
messed up for a second there.
Well, time is the only thing that solves that. You put that apparatus in your mouth, you find a body of water, a pool with an instructor, and you just breathe until you get that confidence in
Yep.
the equipment, and then you got skills you have to learn.
Yeah, exactly. There's a couple people. Right, you're a dive instructor, so I might have to. You're not far from where I am, Doug. I might
Yeah,
have to look you guys up. And
let's do
Rob,
it.
are you also a dive instructor?
I'm not an instructor, no.
Okay, all right. So I'm gonna have to look up Doug. All right. Well,
Don't you got
I
it?
yeah, it's another thing that I would love to do. I tell you, I'm living the dream right now, traveling around. I'm actually pretty close to where Poverty Island is right now, and I'm going to be traveling around some more, some different interesting locations, and doing the show
Nice.
from all over the country. So why not? Yeah, there's somebody said, "Do it, Jeff." Yeah, I'm going to do it. Yeah, I would love to go in the Great Lakes and dive. Anyway, not about me; it's about you guys. But again, thank you so much for coming on the show here today and sharing your information with us and some of your adventure that you've had doing what you love and diving and doing underwater archaeology. It's amazing. And I tell you, if you have something in the future, Rob, if you're back out there working on the 1715 fleet or 1733 fleet, you have anything you want to share, let me know. Same for you, Doug. I mean, I would love to have you on and just do an episode on what you've found in a particular area that you're working or something like that. I would love to have you on and do that again. Well, hopefully that you would feel welcome to come back and
We'll be
do that.
glad to. Yeah, thank you for
That'd
having
be
me.
nice. We've
That
got a
would be
few projects that we're working on together, and who knows?
I'd love to see it. Really would. So just keep in touch. We've been talking. We'll keep in touch, and just love to have you come back on, folks. I hope you've enjoyed tonight's episode with Doug and Rob. I know I certainly have. And if you like, and as I wrap things up here, if you like the content of our show tonight, give us a thumbs up. It really does help us out a lot. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel and click that notification bell so you know right away when we have new content that we come out with. I might jump on at any given moment and jump out and say, hey, guess what? Rob has got some stuff. He's coming up in a week. We're going to talk about it. And you'll never know if you don't click on that notification bell. So do that. And if you want to help support the show, we have our Patreon channel, patreon.com/jfree906. Again, thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, folks, for being here with us tonight. We'll catch you next time right here on the Curse of Oak Island and Beyond live stream. Good night, everybody.
Good night.